Be'ezus Hashem, today's daf is daf Nun Vav. Okay, Nun Vav, Masechta Nazir. We're going to begin from Nun Hema Bay, 2 lines from the bottom. I just drew it up for us so that we can clearly know what we're talking about over here. Just for your information. So you get an understanding of what a Mitzorah is, the procedure of a Mitzorah. Sometimes we're going to just point it out over here, where my thing is. Hi, Louis. We just began. I'm just going over the basic knowledge of Mitzorah and the topic that we are discussing. In a Mitzorah, if someone has leprosy, sometimes the kohen is not sure if it's for sure leprosy. So he puts him in Hezger. Hezger means in quarantine, but not for sure. He doesn't call him a Mitzorah. And sometimes, if it turns out he was held in quarantine wrongly, at the end of 7 days, he just goes free with no carbon. But then, sometimes he could turn into what's called a Mitzorah Muchlik, a for sure Mitzorah. And in the Gemara's language is sometimes that's called Sefiro, that the counting of your Mitzorah. Basically, if you have a white blotch with 2 white hairs out of it, then you're a Mitzorah Vadai. Then at the end of your Mitzorah, if your finding went clean, it disappeared. So then the Torah says you have to take a haircut. I use haircut, but it really means at the end of the Mitzorah days, you have to take a razor blade and razor blade all the hair off your body. Okay? Then you do 2 birds. The Torah describes the process. And then you wait another 7 days and you do a razor blade again, and you razor blade the entire body again, 7 days later. So let us. I'm using this example of a person who was Mitzorah for 7 days. They were unsure. Then it turned out he became a Mitzorah for, let's say, another 16 days, so till day 23. And then, he 23, the Kohen said, you're no more a Mitzorah. And then on day 30, the Mitzorah said that, the Mitzorah gets, completely done with his process. So, hi, Sheldon, we just began. We're just discussing what a Mitzorah is. A Mitzorah is somebody who has this sickness, and at the end of his process of sickness, of quarantine, he razor blades his entire body, and then later, at the finishing, he razor blades his body again. What we are discussing in our Gemara, and it's a very important question, what Rav Chisda discussed, somebody who became a Nazir, right? And in the middle of his Naziris, he became Tomeh with leprosy. So he has to quarantine outside his home, somewhere outside the city, right? The question was, let's say he quarantined, he was a Mitzorah for 30 days. And then, he's finished, he's tahor. Would you count the days that he was in quarantine as part of his Mitzorah promise? So Rabbi Chisda made a comment and he said like this, it depends. If he made, the problem with the Mitzorah is that at the end of his process, he has to take razor blade his whole head. So then if you count his Mitzorah days as part of the Nazir, then what could happen is the Nazir is going to have to take another razor blade, cut off his hair, but he just had a haircut. A Nazir, to qualify for Nazir's haircut at the end of his service as a Nazir, has to have 30 days worth of growth. So Rav Chisda came up with a very interesting idea. He says it depends. If a person, let's say, made a Naziris, and after you finish the Mitzorah, which interrupted his Naziris, if there's less than 30 days, if there's greater than 30 days, that means there's more than 30 days left to finish his Naziris, then you count the days of Mitzorah. So, for example, if the Nazir made a neder that he's going to be a Nazir for 100 days, after day 10 he became a Mitzorah, for 30 days he was a Mitzorah, but at the day 40 he already finished his Mitzorah. So technically, even if you would count the days that he was a Mitzorah, he still has to do another 60 days of Naziris. So then in that case, you would count his Mitzorah days as Nazir days. Okay. But if there's less than 30 days left, let's say he made a Naziris for 50 days. Okay. And after day 10, he already is a Mitzorah. And then for 30 days, he's a Mitzorah. And day 40, he finished his Mitzorah. If the Naziris was only for 50 days, that means he has less than 30 days left for his Naziris, if we would count the Mitzorah days. But if day 50, he's going to be taking a haircut and he only had 10 days of hair growth. In that case, we don't count the Mitzorah days, and he has to count another 30 days. Okay? So that's the way to remember it. If it's a very large
why couldn't he just add like 20 more days?
Because you still need, in order for Nazir to finish his Naziris, you have to have on his head a 30-day growth. 30 days.
Right. So if he had 10 days after he cut his hair, why does he have to add another 30 after?
No. What I mean is that on day 40, he would just have to count another 30 days from that point.
Okay.
But he says, but Rab Chizda says something else. That I would think that, but Rab Chizda says because you can't count the Nazir days because he has less than 30, then none of the Nazir days are counted. In fact, he only has 10 days of Nazir days, and he would have to count 40 days more.
Does that mean during those days he could
he's
drink wine?
That's a great question. I don't think he could drink wine. It's like called a pause in the Naziris. Maybe he could drink wine.
But if it's not being counted at all,
right? So
then he should be able to
drink wine,
stuff that a Nazir can't do.
That's correct. I'm not sure. I think that once you pause it, it's still in limbo, and that you don't count it as the days, but you can't violate your Naziris. You don't count it as you're keeping your not Nazir days, but you can't violate your Naziris. That's what I think. But if there's less than 30 days left, then you don't count the Mitzorah days, and you have to just count the days before you became a Mitzorah, and then you complete it. It's a pause, and then you complete it after. But if there's more than 30 days left for the Naziris, even if to complete it, then you could count your Mitzorah days as part of your Naziris. Okay, the Gemara right now is going to just ask two questions, and totally disregard what Rav Chizda said. Rav Chizda said, basically, if it's a long Naziris, generally, you could count the Mitzorah days as part of the Nazir days. So the Gemara says, back into Nunhei Amid Beis, 2 lines from the bottom. Masiv Rav Rami Bar Chama. Rami Bar Chama asked a question. He said like this: Nazir, the Brisa says, Nazir, the Mishnah says, Nazir shahaya tamei besafik umuchlet besafik. A Nazir on day 1 became right away. He became a tamei. He doesn't know if he became tamei mace, and he doesn't know if he's a Mitzorah. So basically, he has 3 problems. Now, as a Nazir, you have to take a haircut. As a Mitzorah, you have to take 2 haircuts. As a Nazir Tameh, you have to take a haircut. So he has 4 haircuts in his arsenal that he has to do. 1, because he might be a Suffolk Mitzorah, so you have to take 2 haircuts, as we said. A Mitzorah has to take 2 haircuts, and then I say haircut, but he means the entire body. And then there's a possibility that he's a Nazir Tameh, so you'd have to take another haircut because a Nazir Tameh has to take a haircut. And then when you complete your Naziris, you have to you take a 4th haircut. So this guy was a Nazir, but he's not for sure a Tameh Mace. He's not for sure a Mitzorah. So the Brisa, the Mishnah says, we go to the top of a page, Nabava Ma'alef, Oichel B'Kodeshim La'acha Shishim Yoim. He could, after 60 days have passed and he took 2 haircuts, he could eat Kodshim, and then he could finish and drink wine, and he's no more anything after 120 days. So just going to show you the picture so you get it a little clear. This person has three sveikas on him. He's either a Mitzaira, or Nazir Tameh or Nazir Tahar. So after he has to wait 30 days before he takes a haircut, because maybe he's nothing. He's just a Nazir Tahar. And so therefore he can't take any haircut before 30 days, only after 30 days passes, because he's a Nazir for 30 days. So the first, he takes a haircut after 30 days, takes another haircut after 60 days. We're going to assume that in the worst case scenario, the first haircut that he took was the first haircut that he's supposed to take as Mitzora. The second haircut after 60 days is the second haircut that you're supposed to take after as a Mitzora. Because in order for a Nazir to complete his Naziris, he first has to haircut the Mitzora part of his problem out of the way, and then you can go back and take care of your Naziris. So those are the two things that he has to get rid of. So at the end of 60 days, the Mishnah says he can eat kachim, because at that time he's no more considered a mechusa kippurim, although he's not going to bring any carbon. But once you finish your mitzora, you can now eat kachim, but you can't drink wine because perhaps you're still a nazir tameh or a nazir tahar. So and once you got rid of mitzora, you still remain a nazir. So you wait 90 days. And then at the 90 days, well, you're either Nazir Tameh or Nazir Tahar. So you take a haircut after 90 days. Maybe you're a Nazir Tameh. You have to wait another 30 days to day 120. And after day 120, you finished all the sveikas. And for sure, after day number 120, you could drink wine and metama l'mesim. That's what the Brisa, that's what the Mishnah says. The Brisa is going to say something even further. The Bryce is going to say, what happens if a guy made a Mitzora? This is going to be the question. That's it. The guy said that he's a Mitzora he's a Nazir for a year, right? He said he's a Nazir for a year, and after day one, he had all these sveikas come up. He's either a Suffolk Mitzora or Suffolk Nazir, Tameh. So then he waits 1 year, takes a haircut. Maybe that would be the haircut of the Mitzora. Then waits another second year. That would be considered like the second year of Mitzora. Again, he has to wait the year because maybe he's not a Mitzora and he has to keep his Naziris. And after year 2, so he's for sure can eat kachim. Then after year 3, the Brisa says he takes a third haircut. Perhaps he was a Nazir Tameh or Nazir Tar. He takes a haircut. At the end of year number 4, he takes the fourth haircut, and then after the fourth haircut, he's no more a Nazir, and he's no more a Nazir, and then he can eat and he can drink wine and metam l'mesim. That's point. What the Gemara's question is if it's true what Rav Chizda said, but if a guy makes a Nazir for a year, right? Then you count the days of Mitzora as part of his Naziris. So the Gemara says, after 2 years and 30 days, you already solved all your problems. But perhaps he got rid of his Mitzora after 2 years, and then if you count the Mitzora time as part of his year of the Naziris, just wait for 30 days, and that 30 days you're taking a haircut because you're a Nazir Tahar, and where did you keep your Naziris for a year? During the time that you were a Mitzora. And if you're going to tell me, no, maybe he's still a Nazir Tameh, and therefore he had to keep another year, fine. So after 30 days, take a haircut, and then wait another year from that 30-day point, because that will be your Nazir Tameh haircut. And after 1 more year, you keep you become after 3 years and 30 days, you take your haircut as a Nazir Tar. Question is, why do you have to wait 4 years? It's only because you're not counting the days that he was a Mitzora as part of his count. So this Brisa is a refutation against Rav Chizda. V'tana Allah, we learned in a Brisa, when was this all said? Second line from the top, Nunvav, B'Naziris mu'etes, avo b'Naziris ba'shana. If you take a Naziris for a whole year, then you have to keep 4 years of Naziris. Oichel b'kachim lachash shanim. After 2 years, you can eat kachim, take a haircut after each year. And then you drink wine and metam l'mesim after 4 years. The Isal Kadaitich, if you would think that Rav Chisda was correct, that you could always count the days that you were Mitzora as part of your Naziris days, right? You don't lose, it's not a pause, but it's not lost. You could count it as part of your Naziris days. The Gemara says, then it should be enough for 3 years and 30 days. Whatever you're going to remember from this brisa, the bottom line is that we are refuting Rav Chisda's statement. He says that while you're out there in the boondocks, outside the city, sitting as a Mitzorah Nazir, Rav Chisda said, if you made a long Naziris, we will count those days that you're a Mitzorah as part of your Naziris days. And therefore, when you leave your Naziris, when you leave your Mitzorah, all you have to do is count another 30 days. From this brisa, it seems not so. Ba'oid, Mosiv Ravashi. Ravashi asked the question. And here's a clear brisa that says we don't count the time, no matter what. We're not going to count the days that you are sitting as a Mitzorah as part of your Naziris days. You're going to have to make up those days. Ravashi says, the brisa says, I know when a Nazir becomes Tameh, he has to restart his count. You can't, everything, even when he's Tameh, you can't count the days that he's Tameh as part of his new Naziris. You lose everything until you become Tahar, and then you restart the count. The question in the brisa is, how do you know that you don't count the day that you're a Mitzorah also? V'dinu, I will have a Kal V'chomer. The Gemara answers, the brisa answers, I have a Kal V'chomer. You made Tuma, when a Nazir becomes Tameh, Megaleach, Umevi Carbon. You take a haircut and you bring a carbon. V'mei Chiluta, if someone becomes a Mitzorah, Megaleach, Umevi Carbon. You take a haircut and bring a carbon because you're a Mitzorah. So this will be the let's say a Mamatzinu. Ma yemei tumase eina oiloloi min, just like when you're a Nazir Tameh. You can't use your Tameh days as part of your Naziris days. You're a Tameh. Af yemei chiluta, says the brisa clearly, when you're a Mitzorah, ein oiloloi min. I would say those days don't count for your Naziris days. I would say that. So then the brisa goes in the other reverse. Loi. I would say not so. When a Nazir is Tameh, not only his days that he's Tameh don't count for his Naziris, but it also destroys everything he counted until now. But when a person is a Mitzorah, albeit even if you want to say that that Mitzorah should be like a Nazir that's Tameh, but they're different because a Mitzorah never loses the days that he counted prior to him becoming a Mitzorah. You don't lose those days. So maybe I will say, while you're a Mitzorah, you don't even lose those days. So only by a Tumah, where you're losing the previous days, then you don't count the days of Tumah. But when you're a Mitzorah and you're also like a quasi Tumah, you're Tameh, not like a Tumei Mace, but you're a Tameh. So then, since you're not losing the previous days, you could count those days that you're a Mitzorah. So the Gemara says, no, not true. The Gemara goes back. The brisa goes back. Amr Kal V'chomer. I will tell you a Kal V'chomer. Ma Nazir B'kever. A Nazir, let's say somebody makes a Nazir. He says, I want to be a Nazir, and he's walking around a cemetery. So you have to wait to leave the cemetery, retire yourself, and then you start your Nazir's count. But you don't have to take a haircut, because you weren't a Nazir and became Tameh. You were a Tameh right from the very get-go of your Naziris. So Sa'are Royal to Galachas Naziris, that the hair is you can take it. This is a good Nazir here, right? You don't have to take a haircut when you leave the cemetery, clean yourself off, and start counting Naziris. It's good enough. It's good. Ein oilin loy min haminyan. So those days don't count for your Naziris. In other words, while you're still in the cemetery, that's not day one. Day one will be when you leave the cemetery and totally become clean. Then you count day one. But you may chalutai during the days that you're a Mitzorah. She'ain sorry royal to galachas Naziris. The hair that you're growing while you're a Mitzorah, that's not going to be the hair that you're going to make your haircut of a Naziris, because you're going to cut it off when you finish your Mitzorah. So your Mitzorah is a little bit worse than a Nazir Bekever. So loy kolshkein, certainly you will say that during the time of Yemei Chilutai, while you're a Mitzorah, we don't count those days as part of your Nazirus days. So it's like a pause in the action. So here the Brisa clearly says, and you could end the question over here, that the Brisa clearly says that when a Mitzorah is for sure a Mitzorah, you're not going to count the days that he was a Mitzorah as part of his Nazirus days. It'll be like a pause. And then you have to continue the Nazirus from where you left off prior to you becoming a Mitzorah. Now, but the Brisa says not all Mitzoros are that way. The only Eliyamei Chiluta, while you're finishing it, when you're confirmed Mitzorah, you may Safari Manayim. How do you know that 7 days, like after you left, you're already on your way back to the city, and you have to just sit outside your tent for 7 days, those counting days, you also don't count as part of your Nazirus time. But then I would make a kalvachoyma, mamatzino. When you're for sure Mitzorah, point to glachas, you need to take a shave. The first time you make a shave for Mitzorah, after you make safari, the second time when you're going to make that shave, you also have to take a shave, right? So they're both similar. So if you make safari, also the counting doesn't go for the counting. So what the Gemara just said over here is that these 2 points in the screen, these 2 points, when you're for sure Mitzorah, okay, that's called your May, and when you're for sure finishing your Mitzorah, right, don't count for your Nazirus day. So if you're a Nazir, you have to interrupt your Nazirus, be a Mitzorah. When you finish your Mitzorah, you continue the count. That's not like what Rav Chizda said. Now Yochel, the Brisa just adds on 1 point. Yochel, I would think, Af Yemei Hezgorei Kei, that when a person is not yet a Mitzorah, not a for sure Mitzorah, the Kohen wasn't sure if you're Mitzorah, so he put you into like quarantine, but it could be you're not going to be a Mitzorah. Would you count those days as part of his Nazirus day? A for sure Nazir is Mitame. A quarantine Nazir could be Mitame. They have very severe tumah. The difference between a confirmed Mitzorah is confirmed Mitzorah has to bring karbonis. A non-confirmed Mitzorah is Mitame, he's just in limbo. So, if you tell me that a Mitzorah, who's for sure a confirmed Mitzorah, it doesn't count, I would say during the time that you're not sure if you're a Mitzorah, that also wouldn't count. You can't use those days as your Nazirus days. Amret loy, so the Brisa ends off no. The reason why Mitzorah days are not counted, because once you're confirmed, you have to take a real super haircut, a super blade, a razor, and then you also have to bring karbonis. Therefore, those days don't count as part of your Nazirus days. Therefore, because the Mei Hasgera, when you're not confirmed as a Mitzorah, if you somehow get released, you don't have to do teglachas, and you don't have to bring a carbon. Therefore, they accounted for your Mitzorah days. Mekan Amru, here's the bottom line of the Brisa. Yemei Siforoi, Yemei Gamoroi. When you're for sure Mitzorah, during the days that you're counting while you're a Mitzorah, and when you're finished becoming a Mitzorah, Ein Oile Loimin Aminyan. You don't count that as part of your Nazirus days. Your Nazirus is on pause. If you became a Zav, or a Zava, or some other type of tumah of like not sure you're a Mitzorah, a Hezger of a Mitzorah, they are counted as part of your Nazirus. Ketanu Mias. So we have a partial, this ends the whole question against Rav Chizda. Rav Chizda says if it's a large Nazirus and there's more than 30 days left for your Nazirus, you count your Mitzorah days. Ketanu Mias, the partial quote, that's what we're talking about. That a Mitzorah you don't lose the prior days. But what is this Brisa talking about? If the Brisa is talking about a small Nazirus of 30 days, how could you say that you could how could the Brisa have a Havamina to think that right when you finish your Mitzorah, you should be able to right away finish your Nazirus and count the Mitzorah days? You still have to wait at least 30 days to grow the hair. Elalav must be the Bryce is talking about Beniziris Meruba, when there's much more than 30 days left for your Naziris. And nevertheless, the Ketani, the Bryce still says, it doesn't count. You can't use that as part of your Naziris days. Alma loy solkale, it doesn't, you can't use them, and therefore Shmamina is a perfect proof that you can't use those Naziris days as part of your, you have to just make up the count after you finish your Mitzvah. Okay, so we just spent the daf just searching to try to refute Rav Chizda's opinion, who said that you do count the days as your Mitzvah as part of your Naziris days. We hold, no, not so. If your Naziris is on pause, whatever you counted up to you became Mitzvah is fine. Your Naziris is on pause while you're Mitzvah, and then you continue the count after you finish becoming Mitzvah. Let's do the Mishnah and then the Gemara, and this is the rest of the time is very simple. Mishnah says, Amar Rabbi Lezer Mishum Rabbi Yeshua. Lezer said in the name of Rabbi Yeshua, Kol tumah min hameis shenozeh megaleach aleha. Right? Any tumah that a nazir will take will have to interrupt in his naziris. Basically, his naziris falls away. For example, if he touches, let's say, a 2 liters of which is a half a kav of bones, right? So then, if someone would do that, you could juxtapose to another din. If you walk into the Beis Hamikdash after touching that half a liter of bone, then you're that 2 liters of bones. Chayavim allow Beis Hamikdash. We're going to use the expression: if you touch a half a kav of bones, the nazir blows his whole naziris. If you touch a half a kav of bones, you'll be chayiv karis, or if you'll chayiv malchus if you go on purpose, or chayiv a carbon if you walk into the Beis Hamikdash. If you have a tumah min mace, that really could be metame or tumas mace, but the nazir wouldn't lose his naziris. For example, if you touch a quarter of a kav of bones, he's a tamei mace, but he didn't blow his naziris. It's a pause in his naziris. That's what we learned in the previous Mishnah. So then, since it's a lighter form of tumas mace, so to speak, ein chayavim allow bias migdash. You won't be mechayiv a carbon if you did it by accident, or karis if you did it on purpose. Al bias migdash walking into the base of migdash. So that's the rule of thumb. If a nazir will blow his naziris, then you would actually chayiv using that same tumah if you walked into the base of migdash. Amar Rabbi Meir says loy tehezu kalam and asherets. How could you just say lemaisa? At the end of the day, if a person touches a quarter of a kav of bones, right, he becomes tameh. So why shouldn't you be mechayiv? According to Rabbi Meir, if he walks into the Beis Hamikdash, he should get a big avera for doing that. He should be chayiv a carbon, or he should get malchus for doing that. If a person touches a dead sheretz, a dead one of the shrotzim, and walks into the Beis Hamikdash, if you touch a sheretz, you're not tummy for 7 days. And yet, if you go into the Beis Hamikdash like that, you chayiv a carbon oil of iron. So huadin, even if it's a type of tmei mace that the nazir would not lose his naziris, still, according to Rameya, you should be chayiv if you walked into the Beis Hamikdash. So that's what Rameya said. Now, the Gemara is going to deal with one small thing, and that's it. The Gemara dealt with Rabbi Eliezer said it over in the name of Rabbi Yeshua ben Chananya. So the Gemara asks a question, but in a brisa it says Rabbi Eliezer said it over in the name of another person, Rabbi Yeshua ben Mamo, and he said it over in the name of Rabbi Yeshua ben Mamo, who said it over in the name of Rabbi Yeshua ben Hananya. So why did we leave out the middle person over here? So that's the Gemara's question. Rabbi Eliezer Mishum Rabbi Yeshua Damala. Did Rabbi Eliezer learn it from Rabbi Yeshua? Mishum Rabbi Yeshua ben Mamel Gamala. The one that taught him this statement is Rabbi Yeshua ben Mamel. The Tanya we learned in the Brisa. And this is the Brisa just repeating our Mishnah. Rabbi Eliezer says, when I went to this place called Ardaskia, Motsasi es Rabbi Yeshua ben Petarosh. I found this Rabbi Yeshua, son of Petarosh. Funny name. He had a debate with Rameir and Halacha. And he said, Kol tumah men ameis, shenozeh megaleach aleach, chaylav mishum bias migdash. The Kol tumah men ameis, she'ein nozeh megaleach, ein chayav bias migdash. So he said exactly what he said in the Mishnah, that this Rabbi Yeshua ben Peter said, ben Peteros, that what determines a person being chayiv going into the Beis Hamikdash is the same type of tumah that would make a nazir lose his naziris. Omarati like klum ata baki Rabbi Yeshua ben Mamel. I asked this other person, Rabbi Yeshua ben Peta, did you ever hear Rabbi Yeshua ben Mamel? Amali hen. So he said yes. So then Rabbi Lezer said, Kach Amali Yeshua ben Mamel. Rabbi Yeshua ben Mamel told me, Mishum Rabbi Yeshua, in the name of Rabbi Yeshua ben Hanani, called to Memina Meshan, as a Megaleach Alecha, Yovel Mishum Beis Migdash. Called to Memina Meshan, and as a Megaleach Alecha, Ein Chayav Mishum Beis Migdash. Have Mishum Rabbi Yeshua ben Mamel Gamala. So the Gemara's question is, the one that Rabbi Lezer heard it from is Rabbi Yeshua ben Mamel, who heard it from Yeshua ben Hananya. So how does our Mishnah say, Amar Rabbi Eliezer, he said in the name of Rabbi Yeshua. In the Mishnayos, Rabbi Yeshua means Rabbi Yeshua ben Hananya. That's not the direct person he heard it from. Rabbi Lezer heard it from Yeshua ben Mamel. So how did we skip over the source of Rabbi Yeshua of Rabbi Lezer's, where Rabbi Lezer got this halacha from? So what you learn now is how Rebbe organized the Mishnayos. Sometimes Rebbe dropped it because it would just be too much for you to remember it. Kol Amre, Shmamino, you hear from here, Kol Shmaitza de Bis Amre B'Veit Klosa. If there are three people, if so-and-so said it from so-and-so, who said it from so-and-so, so sometimes Kadmoy Basroy Amrim, they'll just tell you the bottom one and the top one, Umitziyase Lo Amrim, and will not tell you the middle one. Like you find it, by the way, in the Megillah, Mordechai ben Yair ben Kish ben Ish Yamini, right? Mordechai ben Yair ben Kish, that's not his father and grandfather. It's just one and then way back all the way to the end. But as same thing over here. Rabbi Lezer heard it from Rabbi Yeshua ben Mamel. We dropped that name and we give him the main source was Rabbi Yeshua ben Hananya. And we finish off on Rabbi Nachman bar Yitzchak. Rabbi Nachman bar Yitzchak said, "Apanan tanami tanina." There are other Mishnayos where they drop things so that you don't, because everything was done by memory. So they didn't want you to have a laundry list of people. So I got my source from Rabbi Yashia, Shekibel Ma'abel, that he got it from his father, Shekibel min Azugais, who got it from some Tanoim that are written in Mishnayos. Avay Shekiblu min Anavim, that got it from the Navis, Chagi, Zechariah, Malachi, and then they got it from Moshe Rabbeinu. Halacha l'Moshe Messinai, he said over this halacha l'Moshe Messinai regarding Peah, that if you're planting mustard and sheves, you have to give payah from each row. But the point is that the Chagei Zechariah Malachi did not see Moshe Rabbeinu. Actually, there's a bunch of Shmuel Hanavi, Yeshua, Shoftim that's in between. So why do we jump from the Nevi'im to Moshe Rabbeinu? So the answer is that V'ilu Yeshua v'Kalev le'kachashav. We don't count Yeshua and Kalev. Shema Amina is the proof that sometimes when you're giving a laundry list of people, you can drop names and just get the main names in there, and that's enough. So anyway, the source of Rabbi Lezer was Rabbi Yeshua ben Hananya, but the Brisa gives you the indication that he really heard it from Yeshua ben Memel, just the Mishnah did not mention that name. Okay. Very good.